Let's bring in here Warren Hogan, independent economist and a consultant to the small business lender, Judo Bank. Warren, always good to have you in the program. Something else came out today, and that is the Bureau of Statistics put out population forecasts into the future of Australia. This is what drives our economy, right?
Exactly, and population means everything, whether you're looking at state economies, the overall economy, and of course, right now we've got the strongest population growth this country's seen in 70 years. The ABS projections here, they are just based on assumptions about fertility, therefore the natural rate of increase, and of course the key one, immigration.
Right, that is the key.
These are not government expectations. They made it very clear that these are just projections.
So I'll just explain to people, in the past 12 months, there's been about 580,000 net migrants come into Australia. And yet at the same time, natural population increase, I know this, was 111,000. If we can go back to that chart for a moment, we'll just explain what those lines actually show you. One is a high and a couple of mediums in the middle, and they're basically around about where you've got the government thinking the population will go. The one at the very bottom, the red line, is basically if we had no net migration into Australia. In fact, over a period of time, you'd see our population would start to fall. The question now is what population is absolutely the right population for Australia going forward, for our children, for our grandchildren?
So the right population is the population that we plan for. So we're having an infrastructure boom across the East Coast in particular right now, and have for the last year or so, and that's catching up to the population growth of the last 15 years. If we want to continue with this pace of immigration, which will bring economic benefits, and we as a country can absorb these people, we have to plan for it. And that's the biggest problem with migration, is willing to accept that we're going to grow and we're going to plan for it and put the infrastructure in place.
So I dragged this out today as well, and I think you'll find this fascinating. In 1984, Australia had a population of 15.6 million. 10 years later, it had risen by 2.2 million to 17.8 million. 10 years after that, you can see it's risen by about, well, it's 3.8 million, 3.6 million actually, to 2014. And beyond that, you can see here, even affected by COVID, it's still gone up by around 3.3 million people. And remember, the government's now trying to play catch up. It's going even faster right now.
Yeah, well, we're looking at 700,000 increase in our population this year, strongest ever. It's a huge amount of people to bring in a short space of time. And I do worry that the broader community support for migration will be jeopardised by this surge, because we're seeing the effects of not planning for it most starkly in our housing market.
In the housing market, right. So we see it in the housing market, rents are rising, home prices are rising beyond where first home buyers can buy. Then take it back the other way, because almost every one of those 580,000 migrants coming in from overseas has found a job. The unemployment rate has not spiralled out. It's not as though they're taking jobs from people who are already here, or any of those sort of rhetoric that you've heard in the past. The fact of the matter is that Australia clearly needed those workers.
We have labour shortages. The job vacancy data last week showed it. We've still got job vacancies of almost 400,000 people. We know in defence, in health, in aged care, education.
So more people will come in, causing only bigger problems for infrastructure and housing.
Well, it's the real issue in the short term actually is one for inflation and interest rates, because we're bringing people in, and sure, that is supplying the labour, but they're getting jobs, having income, and putting demand into the economy, which could frustrate the RBA's efforts to get inflation down.
Right, and then the second thing is the housing industry says we can't build the houses fast enough, because guess what? We can't get the engineers, the builders, the concreters, because they're off building infrastructure projects for the governments.
Exactly right, and that's, I think, one of the real concerns is that we are miles behind our housing requirement. We're talking about hundreds of thousands, at least 200,000 houses short, if not 300,000. And because of this infrastructure boom, which is absolutely necessary, we're going to be using all of our capacity over there, and we're not going to be able to lift our construction of dwellings. Even though we're still, building a lot of houses, we've got to build a lot more.
Meantime, the government loves this, because it gains more than half its revenue from PAYG workers. If you have an extra 580,000 PAYG workers come in last year, guess what? The government's got a whole bunch more tax. It can actually balance its books a bit more, or spend a bit more.
Well, we have seen the income tax take for this government go up by 50% in 2 years, 2 and a bit years. Now, of course, a lot of that's bracket creep, but it's not all bracket creep. This is a much bigger income tax base, i.e. people in jobs in Australia paying tax. So, look, the government's benefiting greatly in a financial sense from the inflow of migrants, and also from the inflation. It's a heady cocktail. It's going to be an interesting budget in May to see what they do with this, but it's making for an economy that is I think, more resilient than what most people are telling us.
Warren Hogan, always good to have you on the program. Many thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Ross.